Hi, everyone, and welcome to Beyond Boredom, 5 Ways to Turn Blase to Brilliance. My name is John Osterman, and I am super excited to talk to you about this topic today, looking at how we can combat boredom in our classroom so that our students are highly engaged and motivated in all that we do. Before we get into that, just a couple of details to take care of. Just so you know, this webinar is being recorded today. You'll have access to that recording as soon as this webinar is finished. So if you hear something you like and you want to share it with your friends or colleagues, please feel free to do so so that they can learn from it as well. In addition to that recording, we also have a handout available that goes over what we're going to talk about today. That should be showing up in the chat right now for you. You'll find links in there to resources I'm going to talk about, as well as just a summary of the topics we're going to cover today. And then finally, we have Robin in the background today. Robin, would you like to say a quick hi?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today.
And Robin will be there to answer any questions you have along the way, whether it's technical or otherwise. She can try to address those for you. Our webinar today is brought to you by Blue Apple Projects. Blue Apple Projects are a great way to engage your students in some self-directed learning and to help teach in a way that will make the world a better place. So I encourage you to check out Blue Apple Projects when you are able. And thanks for sponsoring us today. I would just like to get a feel for who we have with us today. So you should see a poll popping up on your screen. And if you would just select where you are teaching at, what grade level you're at, that should be showing up right now. We'll give you just a second to see what those results look like. My own background is in middle school, and I know boredom was a big deal in middle school as a difficult thing to combat as we were teaching that grade. So check in with Robin and see where we're at.
Yes. All right. So we are at 38% upper L, 33% middle school, 14% early elementary, and 10% admin other, followed by 5% high school.
Excellent. All right, so I'm hearing a lot in that upper elementary range. I think that'll be a sweet spot for this webinar, but for other friends as well, hopefully these strategies I'm going to share with you today, you'll be able to scale appropriately and find a place for those in your classroom as well. So here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to start and kind of define boredom and talk about some boredom triggers. Then I want to briefly talk about boredom as a force for good, something that we might not think of very often. And then, of course, what you're all here for, we're going to go over 5 strategies to move beyond boredom in your classroom. So let's talk boredom. So when I think of a classroom, all the students that I've seen over the years that I've been in a classroom, I had 6 kind of students stand out in my mind. Like when I look over my room of students, I can tell these kids are bored. I'd be curious to know what other ones you could think of, but here are the 6 that I was able to come up with. Are bored students. Number 1, the sleeper. The student who has just checked out. So far, they have put themselves to sleep. Now, I know sleeping might be because of other external factors and things like that that we have to be aware of, but sleeping, pretty good indicator of boredom. Number 2 are daydreamer, those students who are, sitting there, maybe not disrupting anybody, kind of keeping to themselves, but they are off in their own world. I don't know about your experience, but I find that these students are often thinking about food. When is the next, when's lunch? When do I get to eat my next snack? I don't know why, it's always on their minds. 10 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but are daydreamers. Number 3 is our interrupters. And interrupters are not necessarily students I'm thinking of that are trying to be disruptive or act in a negative way. I'm thinking of these students as those ones that kind of walk up to you, maybe while you're working with another student or group of students, and they just barge right in and try to take the stage, right? They're interrupting you wherever you're at. Maybe it's, what do I do next? Or I need this right now. But we have our interrupters. Next we have our wanderers. I have the fortune of teaching in a really neat space. The space has different animals and a lot of distractions in it. So I find these kids to be quite common throughout my teaching time. But these wanderers are kind of piggybacking off those daydreamers, just adding an element of movement to it. The class is working on something self-paced, and this kid's up wandering, checking out whatever there is to see around the room. Next, we have our clock watchers. You know, those students that have to keep track of every second of every day and know exactly how far they are from the next thing, whether it's a break, whether it's the next class, the next bell. They are glued to that clock, and they might let you know it too, always asking, when is this, when is that? They're just keeping their eyes on that clock. And then finally, we have the disruptor. Similar in a sense to that interrupter, but I think of the disruptor as more of using their energy as a force for something negative in our classroom, right? Whether it's a paper airplane in the middle of the class, passing notes, whatever have you, they have this energy kind of pent up and they are directing it somewhere, but it's going where you don't want it to go. And that might be detrimental to your classroom management, to the activity you have going on, to other students' attention. And so we have the disruptor. I find these students to be a really powerful force. And so if we can combat boredom, we can help keep these disruptors from disrupting and maybe even pulling in our other bored students with them. So these are what I think of when I think of what does boredom look like, right? But to define boredom, the dictionary says boredom is the state of being weary or restless through a lack of interest. And I like the two parts here, right? We've got kind of what are they doing? They're weary or they're restless, and then what causes it is that lack of interest. I wasn't initially going to share a definition of boredom. It seemed kind of obvious to me, but as I was talking this through with some colleagues, it occurred to me that I was using several different terms and words to describe boredom. Even things like free time or unstructured time, right? These things that I was talking about, I meant boredom, but I wasn't using that term boredom. So I think it's important for us to identify what kind of boredom are we talking about today? And then to take it one step further, I polled some students to see what words come to mind when they hear the word boredom. And so that's where you get this word cloud from below here. And you can see a lot of those words jive with that weary or restless and then losing interest, right? We've got uninterested was the biggest one. I like yawning and tedious, right? Sometimes tedious tasks are really nice, but they can really wear us down sometimes and be a source of boredom. Uninspiring, repetitive, lifeless. A lot of these things hit on that kind of lack of interest. So sometimes boredom can be combated just even through the way we communicate and share information with our students. But this is the definition we're going to work with boredom today. If you hear me use words like free time and things like that, know that too, I'm kind of lumping into boredom. For me, free time is usually a nice thing. I like that time. But for our students, that time can be a really boring downtime. However, hopefully you'll be able to equip your students with some tools to be able to manage that free time today. So to piggyback off of that definition then, I think when we evaluate our classrooms, 5 things come to mind that probably happen in your classroom that could trigger boredom in our students. The first one is repetitive tasks, right? They have a place, we need to practice skills, and we want to know that you've honed in on these skills, but repetition can lead to boredom and monotony. Next is long talks, lectures, maybe you like to call them. Lectures, long talks look different for different grades. I think the rule of thumb is something like your student's age is about the amount of time they can listen to you talk. So this looks different whether you're working with a kindergarten classroom or a 9th grade classroom. But keep in mind, you know, those talks, those times when you need to take a step back and debrief some information, maybe go over some vocab and connect some puzzle pieces from an exciting hands-on lesson. This was always a struggle for me when I was teaching a middle school science classroom, because there's a place for it, but it is a really good breeding ground for boredom. Next is extra time, whether it's transition time, just those moments in the class where kids find themselves with that free time or extra time. Boredom can creep in, especially if it lasts too long. We also have missed level challenges, right? Are we giving our students a challenge that meets them where they are at? Too hard, they feel defeated, too easy, they move through it too quickly, they wind up with extra time, or they just don't feel engaged because they're plowing through that work. So missed level challenges is another great place for boredom to creep in. And then these last two, lack of choice and or relevance. I kind of lump these together because I think when we offer choice, it makes it more relevant to us, right? When we're robbed of choice, then it might be a little more irrelevant to us. But relevance can be a separate thing too, right? Why am I learning this? Why is this important? What's the context that this is under? So if our students don't understand that relevance or have that choice, it can breed boredom as well. So I'd like you to take a moment and reflect on your own practice, on your own classroom, and I'd like you to pick one of these. When you think over your classroom, which one stands out to you as maybe this creeps up the most? Maybe it's something you need to work on. Like I mentioned, I know for me, long talks always got me because I needed to take that time, maybe it was once a week, maybe it's once a month, whatever it is, we need to take a step back and have a talk together time to just cover some details. So that was always a pain point for me in my classroom. I miss all the hands-on stuff. So curious what you feel is a struggle in your classroom where boredom creeps in. How are we looking there, Robin?
Still coming in. Let's give it 5 more seconds and then I will close it out.
Sounds good. I know this can be different for what classroom you're teaching in, whether it's a math classroom, a science classroom, all of them, maybe it's different points in your day where boredom is creeping in more or less. And these 5 might not capture everything either.
All right, I'm gonna close it out. All right, so the top one is long talks at 54%, followed by extra time at 15%, followed by repetitive tasks and misleveled challenges at 12%, and at the bottom, lack of choice and or relevance at 8%.
All right, excellent. That's great to know. So I got some people who can who empathize with me on the long talk. So we're going to go over some strategies, and the strategies are all going to target these 5 triggers for boredom. And I got a couple great ones for long talks. So hopefully you'll find those helpful in your day-to-day. But before we do that, let's take a quick step back and just talk about boredom as a possible force for good. Boredom always has a negative connotation, but I know for me, I tend to be a control freak in my classroom. I think that's a lot of teachers, right? We want to have everything planned. We want to know what's coming next. I'm a chronic overplanner. I always have too much stuff for my classroom. And so that sometimes leads me to crunching things in rather than giving them the space and breath they need. And so I want to encourage us today to think about that line of how much do we put into our class. The strategies I'm going to share with you aren't necessarily meant to fill every moment of every day. I think boredom can have some really positive side effects, and there's some science and studies that are coming out to show and support this idea. But allowing those moments, perhaps intentionally in our classroom during the day, boredom can enhance problem solving. It can enhance self-discovery, help us become more present, notice our surroundings, and maybe take a step back. It can foster independence, right? Not knowing what to do with my free time is a symptom of never being bored, right? So if I allow for some time to be bored, I can pick what to do. If I have those choices, even better. Now I know what to do with that time. And then I love this last one, right? Boredom teaches conversational skills. So When we're bored, what do we mostly do? Especially not in a classroom setting, we pull out those phones, we pull out a device, we entertain ourselves in that way. But boredom is a really great time to let that volume rise in our classroom and maybe let students have those conversations. Maybe it's about the topic, maybe it's about something else, about their day. A really great opportunity to learn about our students through those just impromptu conversations. So I want you to keep in mind that leaving a little bit of space for boredom isn't always bad. I do a lot of engineering challenges, and there's a lot of self-directed in those. And when kids have moments of not knowing what to do, you know, my question is always, how can you make it better? But what other ideas do you have? Talk to somebody else. So leave that space in your classroom to let a little bit of boredom. It could be good for us and our students. But to combat boredom and maybe to help give some direction during those extra times, we're going to start with our first skill here, which is the board. This is a really great one for that extra time, those in-betweens, our early finishers. And the board is simply a choice board that is built to equip students with some tasks that they can engage with during that downtime. Again, helping them to know what to do with that downtime. So this is just one example. These boards could be as big or as small as you want. I chose to make mine virtual. This one was just made through a Google slideshow with links, and I shared it out to my students in one of my after-school programs. They were studying energy. And so I chose to kind of link this up to our learning, but have it be extra. So a lot of these are focused on energy. And you can put great things like simulations in here. PHET has just some really awesome simulations that are actually a lot of fun to play around with, and kids can learn a thing or two from them. Some of them are just for fun games. The Lunar Lander, for example, was just a fun, challenging game. But we've got Stump the Teacher. Kids always enjoyed this one. I would create a Padlet board. I'll talk about Padlet more in a little bit, but they could post something they learned. Maybe they grabbed it from a simulation. Maybe they grabbed it from a current event, which is another block on here. And they could try to stump me, share a fact to me, ask a question. So that was always a fun challenge that we could engage in. But really just giving a variety of ideas and a variety of modes to engage with different content for our students to keep themselves busy. When I implemented this, the amount of times I was asked, what do I do next, decreased significantly. I even encourage kids, you know, if you're stumped and I can't get to you yet and you're waiting patiently, you can turn to this for a few moments, have a partner keep their hand raised, you know, fill some of that time if you need to with something. It was a really effective strategy for me. In the HyperDoc, you'll also find a link to some different choice boards and different physical choice boards that you can put together. Those are all there for you to use and to manipulate in the way that you see fit. This board is also there as well, so you can steal these ideas from there, implement them in your classroom. So that one really just targets our extra time. The next one is learning menus, and learning menus are a great way to vary our assignments, the things that we want to give to kids. So a learning menu might look like this. And what we're looking to do is differentiate the content that the students are getting, the process, what are they going to do with that information, and then also the output, the product, right? What are they going to make? So this is a really great strategy for increasing student agency, upping engagement, building perhaps some collaboration in here as well. As you can see from the example here, students get to pick how they want to learn about something, either through a video, an article, a thing link. I'll mention those more in our next strategy, and then a podcast. So we've got different ways of learning it. And then they have to pick a side and a main, which is some way they're going to process the information they've just gained. And then the dessert is sharing it out. Who are they going to share it with? How are they going to share it out? We wrap this all into a budget in this instance, so they have to spend $30 or less on this to complete this particular task. Really great way to break up projects, to change those repetitive assignments that you've got going on, and engage your students in some choice. So learning menus. Next, we have, for all of our long talk combatants out there, people who need to find a way to break up their long talks, I really like this one. I wish I would have known about it when I was a middle school teacher. It's called a note scavenger hunt. So note taking and lectures can be a very passive process. It's a passive process that demands a lot out of our students, right? We need to listen, we need to write, we maybe need to look at a screen and slide and spell correctly or look at what we're writing. That really can all be overwhelming and just lead to that shutdown, that boredom. But a note scavenger hunt is a way to take that passive and boring process and turn it into an active process. So what does that look like? Well, it could be taking a note sheet you already have made. It could be as specific as you want it to be or as open-ended. I'm going to share with you an example here where we're exploring the life of Martin Luther King Jr. So you can see this is a pretty open-ended question. Students are going to find facts about Martin Luther King Jr.'s life and interesting facts that they want to share. This could be a timeline, right? They have a timeline that they need to put together. This could be your standard notes sheet with fill in the blanks. But what's then going to happen is around your classroom, you're going to post different QR codes, maybe different books, maybe those QR codes link to videos, or you've printed out articles. You're going to set these stations around the room and then allow the students to get up and engage in this active process of filling in the notes. They get to pick which station they want to go to. They get to collaborate with the students around them to work to hunt down these facts and to fill them in. And so when we build in that movement, we build in that choice, we up that engagement and active participation, our boredom decreases. One other tool I want to share with you here to help enhance your notes scavenger hunt is called a thing link. If you haven't heard of a thing link before, I'd encourage you to check them out. The website is linked in our hyperdoc. But a thing link, you can start them for free and make a limited amount of them. But what you do is you take a picture and you can see these orange bubbles in the picture. Each of those bubbles links to something different, whether it's something I typed up or whether it's an outside resource or video. They all link to something that the students can then go explore. So this one is for the Martin Luther King Jr. exploration, where kids will be clicking on these different links to learn about Martin Luther King Jr.'s life. This is also structured like a slideshow, so they can go from slide to slide and hunt through these different clickables to learn about whatever topic you have for them. So this can be linked to a QR code as well, so they get taken to a thing link. You could build a scavenger hunt just in this thing link. So thing link, a really powerful tool to pair with your notes scavenger hunt. All right. This next one is really great for breaking up repetitive assignments, repetitive tasks, and has a little bonus for extra time, but it's called wrong answers only. It is what it sounds like. Rather than working through a worksheet and filling it out with correct answers, let's challenge our students to put all wrong answers in. This can build in an element of humor. Humor is always a great way to squash boredom. But an interesting challenge here too is to make your wrong answer as believable as possible, right? So try to make it sound good. This gets our students thinking critically about information and trying to piece this together, the information that they know, and make it look wrong. This could then be exchanged with different partner pairs to explore and is wrong. Here I've given an example in a science class of looking at physical and chemical changes and describing the difference. And when you read over that description, sometimes it even gets me a little bit. I read that and I'm like, that sounds pretty good, but I know it's wrong. So let's dissect this and identify what is wrong with that answer. The other nice thing about this challenge is that it starts to normalize wrong answers and helps our students understand what they can learn from wrong answers. That wrong answers aren't a bad thing or something we should be ashamed of, but they are an opportunity for growth and an opportunity to learn. So trying this strategy out can be a really great way to identify misconceptions and to help students see that it's okay to be wrong. I like this one for a back pocket extra time thing too. Maybe you've got a student that flew through answering some questions. Their next challenge is to go back through those questions and come up with wrong answers for each of them. So a lot of fun different possibilities with this wrong answers only strategy. And finally, our last strategy of 5 is called you pick. This is a really great one for the extra time once again. You pick is essentially where you are going to collect things that students are interested in, things that they're curious about. You're going to put that all in one place. And then when students have extra time, they can head to this board and investigate those questions. To help do this, I love Padlet. Again, another free to start off with resource. I think you can make 3 Padlets for free to begin with. And so Padlet is just kind of a board where you can drop things in. I used this in class recently where we were studying sustainable energy. Rather than putting their questions here, I put resources that answered or helped clarify questions along the way. And this would be a place that they could go to look deeper, to dive more, and to learn something. Students can also post on these Padlets if you let them, if you allow the permission to do that. So you could start to share out their interesting learnings through this Padlet as well, and even open up some dialogue through text on your Padlet, on your UPick Padlet. So this is a really great way for students to have some choice, to dive into a challenge of their own, trying to answer a question that they had, maybe one that you couldn't answer. And then once in a while, I'd encourage taking some time in the classroom to let kids share something they learned through this UPick activity. So the UPick board is a really great way to get our students ignited and excited about some of their own interest. The link to Padlet is in that hyperdoc as well, so you can check that Padlet out. Finally, I got one bonus for us today. We've talked about our 5 strategies, and I hope that those 5 strategies you can take and you can use some of them, beginning tomorrow, next week, and they can help transform your classroom. But if you're looking to take it even a step further, project-based learning is a great way to squash boredom in your classroom. So this isn't just another project. This isn't just another poster or PowerPoint that your students are creating. This is your class. This is your instruction. We're starting with a real world problem, a real world and relevant problem that students can investigate. And then we're helping them, we're scaffolding along the way to help them investigate that problem and create something they can share with the world to hopefully help make the world a better place. It's highly collaborative, it's student driven, and it's a really great way to kill boredom in our classroom. So if you're looking to take the next step, I'd encourage you to check out project-based learning. I'll tell you more about how we can do that in just a moment. Before we do that, I am curious, as we wrap up here today, which strategy resonated with you today? Is there one that stood out that you want to use? You can select multiple here. Maybe there were a couple. I'd just like to get a little feedback from you and see what stood out as usable in your setting. So we'll give you a few moments to share that. I know, like I said earlier, the scavenger hunt was one that I would love to have had when I was in a science classroom. So how are we doing, Robin?
All right, I'm gonna get 5 more seconds and then I will close it out.
Perfect.
Oh man, they're still rolling. All right.
Oh.
All right, so it looks like everyone is gonna try lots of these strategies, but the top is the board at 59%, followed by the scavenger hunt at 56%, wrong answers only at 30%, you pick 22%, and learning menus 19%.
Fantastic. All right. Well, I hope that board and that no scavenger hunt work out for that majority of you. And I hope you all have been able to take something meaningful back to your classroom today. As I mentioned a little bit ago, that next step might be project-based learning for you. If you're interested in learning more about project-based learning, we'd love to hear from you. If you like what you heard today, we'd love to hear from you. You can check us out more at vaei.org and head to FlexPD, where we will help customize and transform your classroom. We'd love to hear from you to share with you more about these topics. We hope that you'll join us next time. Our next webinar is January 18, our first one of the new year at 4 p.m., where we'll be talking about managing the STEM classroom. And we'll be going over 5 helpful hacks to manage your STEM classroom. So we hope to see you then. And finally, after this webinar is over, you'll have the opportunity to complete a survey. If you complete that survey, you'll be entered for a chance to win a Blue Apple project. And that's a really great way to get you started down that road to project-based learning. But just for being here today, you can fill out, you have a code to get 10% off your Blue Apple project, your next Blue Apple project purchase. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope to see you next time.